first start learning to read sheet music, we need to learn the names of the notes, so A to G, and then where they go.
Where do they go?
On our staves, right? Our treble clef and our bass clef. But have you noticed?
You may have noticed
that those are only for the white keys on the keyboard. But there's a bunch of black keys on there too. So how do we tell musicians which black keys to play when our written notes are only for the white keys? The answer is accidentals.
Accidental life!
And this video is all about them. So first, there's a few things that we need to define before we move on to the main content of the lesson. Firstly, what is an accidental?
What are they?
Well, an accidentally is simply an alteration of one of the 7 pitches of music. So A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. An accidental is a symbol that we use to show, as I said, an alteration.
Alterations?
To one of those 7 pitches. There are 3 types of accidentals: sharps, flats, and naturals. And we're gonna get to those in just a second. Before we can understand how sharps, flats, and naturals work, there's a few other terms we need to know. Firstly, half steps and whole steps.
You know what? Baby steps, baby steps, baby steps.
These are the functions that our accidentals are going to be carrying out. So it's really important we know what they are and how they work. So a half step simply refers to the very next key. So let's start with C, right? It's an easy note to start with. If we go a half step above C, it's the black key right next to it. If we go a half step below C, it's a B. So it's not referring to black or white keys, but simply the very next key is a half step. Now the next term we need to know is a whole step. I bet you can guess what that is, right? If we have a half step, well, 2 halves make a whole, correct?
Yes, 2 halves make a whole.
So a whole step, let's start from C again. A whole step up from C is going to be D, because we go from the C to the black key right next to it, and then the very next key is that D. Now, if we go a whole step below C, same concept, right? We're gonna take that C, go down a half step to B, and then a half step below that is the black key right next to B. So that's a whole step below C. And then the names that we give these black keys are dependent on how we decide to alter the notes. And that's why we have the term enharmonic pitch, which is just a fancy way to say it's different ways to say the same note.
Oh, fancy.
So for example, a C sharp is the same note as a D flat. We're gonna get into why in a second, but so often students ask me, why don't they just do it this way or that way? Music is written with specific accidentals to reflect the scales or chords being used in the written music.
It's all connected.
And that's why it's very important that we understand the functions of accidentals so we can understand their larger function within the scales and chords of our music. So the first accidental we're going to cover is sharps. They look like a little hashtag.
Hashtag that is all.
Tic-tac-toe. It's always easy to remember these, right? I'm sure you see these quite often if you are a fan of social media. A sharp raises a note a half step. Remember, that doesn't always mean that it's a black key though. So for instance, if we have an E and we make it an E sharp, the very next note on the keyboard is an F, right? But if we have a G and we make it a G sharp, there's that black key right there. So that is a G sharp. Sharps are simply referring to moving a note up a half step. We have another kind of sharp, which is used, in more complicated music later, but I like to introduce it to students now so they can see just all the different accidentals we have. It is called a double sharp. It looks like an X. It's actually pretty cool. It moves a note up a whole step. So it raises notes a whole step. So for example, let's start with that E again. An E double sharp, let's go 2 half steps, right, to make it a whole. So we go from E to F, and then we go up another half step, and that black key right there is an E double sharp. Now, what's another name, or the enharmonic pitch name, for an E double sharp? Well, let's see, we have the black key right there next to the F. It's a half step above F. F sharp. So E double sharp and F sharp are the same pitch, the same enharmonic pitch. The next accidental we're going to learn is a flat. So a flat is basically kind of like a B. It looks just like a little B. It lowers a note a half step.
Okay, I'm going down. Going down.
So let's take a D, for instance. Where's our D flat going to be on the keyboard? Well, we start with the D and then we go a half step down. So the very next key is going to be the black key right below D. That's our D flat on the keyboard. Can you think of the enharmonic equivalent of D flat? So look at where that black key is. It's in between the C and the D. If we move the D down a half step, that black key, as we just said, is a D flat. But if we're expressing it as a C, we have to move it up a half step. So that note is a C sharp. And that's why D flat and C sharp are the same note. Secondly, we have a second type of flat, which is the double flat. It's actually just two flats right next to each other. I always wondered why the double sharp had its own cool little symbol and a double flat was just like two flats. I don't know, maybe they got bored and they were just like, just throw it in there, two flats next to each other. But either way, our double flat, two flats next to each other, lowers a note a whole step. So let's start with an A, right? Where is A flat? Just A flat by itself. Well, it's the black key right below A. If we want to make it an A double flat, we have to go down another half step, which would make it the enharmonic equivalent of G. So when you see A double flat on your music, you're actually going to play a G. Now keep in mind these double flats and double sharps very rarely, if ever, happen in beginner sheet music.
Oh, thank goodness.
But it's just important to know and see the relationship of half steps and whole steps and how we use them to alter our music. Our last accidental is definitely the easiest one. It is called a natural. It's a little box and it's got these like little lines off to the side of it going vertically up and down. This note is called a natural because it makes the notes natural.
Natural, like natural.
It makes them just whatever they are. So the function of a natural is that it cancels a previous accidental. We're gonna get into how that works in a second, but all you need to know about naturals is that when you see it, it's just a white key. So F natural is just an F. G natural is just a G. A natural, just an A. Now for the rules of accidentals. There's really only three main rules that I have students learn and follow very strictly. The first rule is that accidentals reset every bar line.
Oh, there's a reset button.
So what does that mean? When you're going through your music, let's say you see an F sharp in one bar, if you go to the next bar and there's an F, that is just an F natural because the bar line resets the sharps and flats from the previous bar. Now, the second rule and the third rule kind of go together, but I like to make a distinction just to really drill it home into students' head. So the second rule, accidentals are always on the left side of the notes.
The left side was the right side.
You know, to be fair, it is kind of confusing because we call something a C sharp, a D sharp, and the accidental in the name is after the letter name. But when it's written on sheet music, they always go to the left of the note. So when you have a bunch of notes that are like kind of close together and you see sharps and flats or whatever in your music, the accidentals go on the left sides of the notes. You don't want to apply it to the ones on the right. So rule number 2, accidentals are always on the left sides of notes. And the third rule, and I say they kind of go together because it's all about placement of accidental, the accidentals always line up with the correct line or space of the note that it is altering.
Line it up.
And again, as I always say, music is on a grid. You have to be aware of this grid property. Like so often students will be looking at music and they'll misplace which note is being altered by the sharp or the flat, just simply because they're not making the distinction of what line or space that accidental is on. Nothing is done in written music like with guessing. It's all very exact. And that's why we can play music like 400 or 500 years old, because the notation system is very specific. So when you see sharps and flats next to, like, say, a chord, you know, the accidentals are only affecting the notes that it is directly lined up with. So lastly, practice this.
Practice.
Like, it's gonna take a minute to get used to these half step and whole step relationships in your music. There are awesome websites. I'm gonna put the link down below. There are a bunch of worksheets that you can do, but just the more time you spend familiarizing yourself with what the accidentals do, the easier it is to make that relationship with what you're seeing on the music and what you want to play on the piano. And of course, besides just doing worksheets, you want to do it in practice. And I am a huge believer in sight reading. As I always say, it doesn't have to be hard. Sight reading should be scaled to your level. So if you can only do a few notes at a time, that's fine. They make sight reading books specifically for this purpose because it's so important.
Freeze right there. This better be important.
So make sure that when you are doing your sight reading practice, that you are able to see the accidental and the note together as one thing. And lastly, when you're talking about the notes, an E and an E flat is not the same thing. So often in lessons, I'll ask students, oh, tell me the notes in this chord. And they're like, C, E, G. I'm like, no, you're wrong.
You're wrong. Dead wrong.
And they're like, what? That's what the notes on the staff are. I'm like, no, dude, there's a flat next to that E. E flat and E are two different notes. And in fact, that makes a totally different chord from what you're playing. So even if they play the E flat, just by calling it an E, it's not helping. Whenever you see accidentals, refer to the note as the full written name. So an E is not an E flat, an F is not an F sharp. I know it sounds like I'm kind of being a stickler about it, which I am, but for good reason. Form those relationships, and reading music will be like reading a book. That is a wrap on this video about accidentals. I hope you learned some good stuff about sharps, flats, and naturals. As always, drop a like, a comment, definitely subscribe if you have not already. I would love to get this information out to as many people as possible, and I need your help to do it. So anything you can do, much appreciated. If you appreciate the content as well, definitely check out www.thepowerfulpiano.com. We've always got some sick merch so you can be fitted and support the cause. So as always, good luck with the practice and stay powerful, y'all.